Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. My name is Serge. Joining me today, I've got a Nelly.
Hey, I'm here.
We got a Wheeler.
Found.
And on tech, we got a James.
Dations.
Oh, do you two practice
That was going to be my bit for the end of the show. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I just
Now I have
Disliked
to
it.
say
Rejected.
something else?
You got an hour to figure it out, my man.
This place is a prison.
Reminder that you can keep Wheeler locked up in this jail over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Your money means he can't go home.
the jail of employment and capitalism. Hell yeah.
All right. So, real talk, very quick. We never do this here on North 100, but the LRRMTG YouTube channel is like 1,000 subscribers away from the incredible milestone of 100,000 YouTube subs, at which point they'll send us a plaque, which is pretty cool. I don't know. It's a thing. That's a milestone. Number go up. And according to the analytics, 1 in 5 of you who enjoy look at these handsome boys over here. 1 in 5 of you have not subscribed to the channel. So consider this a very rare subscriber ask. That's all. Welcome to our Foundation set review. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. A lot of you are thinking, thank God, the very first people in the entire Magic world to talk about this set. Sorry, hold on. What's that? It's been out for a month? Oh.
There's no way.
No.
All the other content creators that in the Magic sphere were patient and just waited
It
for
waited
us,
for
right?
us? Oh my God.
Right?
We were first in line.
Their set reviews are also just worse.
Pow, pow.
Yeah, welcome to, because again, our set reviews are through the lens of Canadian Highlander, quite possibly Magic's greatest format. Now, to that end, it is important to note that our format is not, the format of our set review is not exhaustive. We're not going to talk about every single card, only the cards that we think are interesting or relevant or that we want to get ahead of you for conversations about why we are talking about it or not. We're covering the Foundations core set. We're covering the Jumpstart product. And while technically there is also Foundations Commander, it's only 3 cards, Wheeler?
3 reprints.
And they're all reprints and they're all staples, so you already know what they are. Today we're covering white, blue, and black. That's enough housekeeping. Let's get right into it. Wheeler, start us off.
Brigone, Soldier of Meletus from the Jumpstart product, is a 2/2 legendary human soldier. It's a creature for 1 and a white. It has Vigilance, Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Brigone, you put a 1/1 counter on it. And tap, remove a 1/1 counter from Brigone, draw a card. The counters deck is very exciting to me, which is why it is something that if there's any new card that can be featured in it, I like putting it on the spreadsheet because they're not going to stop. They just keep... People love +1/+1 counters,
they really
and
do.
they love cheaper cards. It's also just one of the card styles that even if it's geared towards something like Commander, we get cheap ones because they know that they need time to scale.
Yeah.
So we can take advantage of that, especially in products like Jumpstart. Brigone is an interesting one because it fills kind of a similar role to something like Dusk Legion
Yes.
something or other.
Dusk Legion, also 2/2 for 2 that draws cards.
There's another one, a 2/2 for 2, that I believe also has Vigilance that says whenever a 1/1 counter is put on it, you draw a card, but
Once
that
per
can only
turn,
be
yeah.
once per turn. Which redundancy in that type of deck is pretty interesting. Card draw in that type of deck is pretty interesting. But also this card has Heroic, which is kind of a way for it to put counters on it by itself, which the Dusk Legion card does not have access to it. And the few spells that the counters deck plays outside of stuff like Swords to Plowshares and whatnot are typically going to be cards like Snakeskin Veil, Legolas's Quick
God,
Reflex.
That card is so good. That card is so good.
Those style of cards. So getting counters on this is not as difficult as, the heroic ability, or not as narrow as the heroic ability may lead you to believe. And also just like side little archetypes is that the humans, the Death and Taxes or the mono white humans deck does have a lot of ways to put counters on cards. Also has some of
Like
those
3
protection spells.
Luminarch aspirants now or whatever too.
So many Luminarch
Yeah, it's
aspirants,
absurd.
Thalia's lieutenant,
Yeah.
whatever, some other crap that I can't think of. But also the soldiers deck is getting more. That's another like archetype. There are two typal archetypes that I have my eye on: soldiers and zombies,
We've been
and we're going to be
talking
talking about them.
We've been talking about human and soldiers for ages too. Like this
Yeah.
is the slam dunk of creature types. One thing you didn't mention that I have been keeping my eye on is actually red, white, heroic.
Yeah.
Because Bloomborough introduced the Valiant mechanic, which was particularly strong in a bunch of like red rares and mythics. I'm thinking about that one mouse with Valiant, Haste, and whatever, and
The
Prowess.
Challenger.
Or something stupid.
Yeah, that card's great.
That card looks absolutely cracked, and I don't know why I would play red white heroic instead of just like Gruul monsters. is maybe the problem, but the more cards that you get like this, the more tempted I am. I mean, Feather exists,
Yeah.
right?
I did have a little blurb about heroic and pump spells like later in the review, admittedly once we got to red green, because there are
Sure.
a couple of cards that reinforce that
Very
too.
funny.
But yeah, I mean, I've killed so many people with Berserk, and I think there's a reason to go for a heroic style as opposed to a Gruul monsters. It's just you're faster. There's a bit more risk reward, right? Well, there's more of a risk in that like you are playing pump spells in 2024, but also the reward is you get to really take advantage of some of the pump spells that even the Gruul monsters kind of decks are playing, and also just Berserk is 1 mana win the game. Like it's, you get access to these tools that are other decks are using like, wow, this kills people, and then a deck like this is like, wow, this murders people. Like it is, very good at that. All in all, to say about this card is that I think it fits into the counters archetype smoothly, and then some of the more niche archetypes that we've mentioned are always happy to have 2 drops that do that.
I love when we spend 5 minutes talking about a 2-mana 2/2.
Some of these cards we're going to be very quick.
I know.
There's not much to say about some of them, but this one, there's some nuance. It's
you
got
have
3 lines of text.
Did you have anything you wanted to add on this one particular, Nelly?
Wheeler said most of it. Just that the main reason I'm excited for the new counters cards from this set is that like I've been playing with various different counters decks this year in some different color pairings, and I think like looking at the Highlander forum, especially like the Highlander Discord, like I don't think the best like counters deck has been solved yet.
No,
like this
God,
is a pretty new burgeoning archetype still. So anytime anything looks like maybe it goes in, you're like, well, we got to try it, right?
There was, this is going to date me. What am I talking about?
Sure.
But like
All right, no.
pre-pandemic, there were a couple of players that were just like jamming Jund counters. And that deck felt so real and then just disappeared. So like to what Nelson's saying is that whenever we talk about counters, my brain immediately goes to green-white as the base.
That's so funny.
But Jund is just like...
Well, one of the
I
first
played
ones.
Sultai earlier this
Well,
year.
yeah, I was going to say Bug was one of the first ones I saw because you had green for Hardened Scales, green black for Winding Constrictor, and blue for what's the one that makes tentacles whenever you draw cards?
Oh, Nadir Kraken.
Right.
Yeah.
Like so many of those grow threats in blue, right?
It was one of the tournament-winning counters lists from maybe a couple years ago by now was like 4-color, no white. So
No
yeah,
white?
it hasn't been solved.
That's so funny because I mean, like we mentioned, all the best creatures that make +1/+1 counters and spread it are in white. I would argue.
Yeah, and they keep doing it.
Incredible.
They'll keep printing them.
All right, let's move on to the next card, Nelly.
Let's talk about Celestial Armor from the Foundation
This is
set.
just- yeah.
2 and a white for an artifact equipment with flash, and when this enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. It also gets +2/+0 and has flying. And after the initial equip, it equips for 3 and a white. So a color restricted 4 mana equip. Obviously going to be everyone's least favorite thing about the card, but let's talk about the good sides, right? This is sort of like a counter spell for a removal spell with massive upside. You could play it mid-combat and just get value out of the indestructible. You can play it pre-combat or on your own turn if it's safe to just jump one of your creatures and get in with flying, a la, help me out here, 3 mana from Zendikar, also free to equip the first time, +2/+2 flying first strike. The
The
mace?
mall?
The mace?
Oh, the mall. Sky.
Mall.
Yeah,
Sky-
Sky Mall.
Sky
Sky
Mall.
Mall.
Sky Mall.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Mall of the Conclave, I think. No,
Yeah, Mall of the Skyclaves.
Mall of the Skyclaves. Yeah.
we got there.
So it fills the same niche as Mall of the Skyclaves when you're like trying to attack for lethal, but it also has flash
Yeah.
and counters their burn spell on your creature or their fatal push, whatever it is, and or can play combat trick to just give indestructible until end of turn. So a lot of flexibility. Obviously, it's a 3-mana equipment, so only in places where you want to play those. I could see white decks that only have like, you know, Shadow Spear off Saga and Skull Clamp and Maul of the Skyclaves trying this one out instead of Maul of the Skyclaves. Maul of the Skyclaves gives you a bit more once you've done the initial. I played it, I got the free equip, we traded with whatever was going on, and then the game's still going because I think Maul of the Skyclaves gives +2/+2 as well as First Strike.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First strike and flying.
Yeah, so it's a bit easier to equip this new one, and obviously it has flash and gives the hexproof indestructible versus the Maul just being like the beefier first striking one. But I could definitely see players trying to adopt this one in those decks, and then also probably, you know, any very deeply equipment focused decks probably excited to have like a flash equipment that gives a trigger.
I feel like this is where we divide on the equipment deck because I like this.
I like this too.
Oh, okay, never mind.
there you
Why
go.
Why would you think I don't like this?
Mm.
Because it's good.
Do I want to roast you? Yeah.
I feel like Serge was just like, Wheeler, roast me.
No, because my approach to the equipment deck tends to be more mid-range.
Right. I like to try and win very quickly, which is so funny because you like to go like big hammer mode,
Yeah.
which I think of as a combo mode, which I think wins out of nowhere. But I guess you like to take your time to set it up, where I like to go fast.
Yeah, it's not the first Colossus Hammer hit that kills them. It's that they struggle to deal with it, and then they have to deal with it again.
Sure.
Sort of
The
thing.
fourth derelict.
Sure.
And I think my build tends to play more cards that can circumvent the equip cost. Like my favorite card in that deck is Arden from Commander Legends, that
Sure.
you can attach one of your equipment to anything.
Yeah.
Arden, and you Skull
And
Clamp
you
that
dig in like Forge Anew or whatever and all that stuff.
Yeah, I like those kind of cards.
Sure.
And this tends to fit better
Yeah.
in that style of deck.
I think I want to change my style of deck anyways, and I like this because and this is going to seem like maybe a weird tangent, but kind of like the modal double-faced cards. I love the flexibilities that tutors are giving you now, where with a Stoneforge, I'm just picturing a line of like activate Aether Vial, get Stoneforge, and then like flash in this as a combat trick. Just you're giving yourself a toolkit that you can interact with the board more, because typically with the equipment you have, you are kind of in this position of always having to go forward and you're not very flexible. And if your opponent can stall you that way, there's not a lot you can do. And so it's why I love, oh my God, what's the big red finishing artifact called?
Embercleave.
That's why I love Embercleave,
Mhm.
is because it's so unexpected, and getting people like that, I feel is really how you have to win in that deck. And that's why I like the pressure of going fast is you get them before they can find a defense to it. And I think this fits that playstyle well,
Yeah.
but I should slow down. You're right.
Oh, does anyone know if we've had any other art from Elena Richards? I feel like we're maybe...
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
This isn't their first piece?
Nope.
Very striking.
All right, next up, Eidolon of Astral Winds. This is from the Jumpstart. This is a 3-mana 2/4 enchantment creature spirit for 2 and a white. It has vigilance and constellation. Whenever Eidolon or another enchantment creature you control enters, choose target creature you control. Until end of turn, that creature has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains flying. This is such an absolute slam dunk in the green-white Sanctum Stompy style deck. I just wanted to choose target creature. It's not even an enchantment creature. I was worried there was another enchantment in there. So this can even jump your enchantresses, which normally want to sit back and are very vulnerable, and you don't do anything proactive with them. Oh, sorry. This card slices, it dices, it's beautiful. And because of the way the constellation is worded here, because it triggers off itself, you're in the position where if you have an enchantress in play, you draw a card and the enchantress hits for 4, and you're left with a 2/4 body. Very excited about this. I feel this card is exactly what the deck was needing, which was more punch, more kill in that, more proactive. Like the deck already has a pretty good draw engine going, but it didn't have a lot of threats. And this also being an enchantment creature that synergizes is incredible.
This isn't a jab at you, because I also like this deck. This deck was a deck that had a bunch of bad creatures that you tried to make good,
Yes.
and now it is slowly becoming
That's
a
what
bunch of
I mean, right?
good
Yeah.
creatures that you are now making better,
Yes.
right?
Oh, you summarized that very, very well. I don't have too much more.
Thank you. It's my job.
Well, back to you then.
Okay, big angel guy who's flying and does a thing. No. Exemplar of Light.
Yes.
2 white for a 3/3 angel from the main set with flying. Whenever you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature, and whenever you put one or more 1/1 counters on this creature, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is a 4-drop that does die to Lightning Bolt, and that makes it not great. That said, I'm only really interested in playing this card in the you can't even call it Soul Sisters. I mean, I guess you can call it Soul Sisters now. Like back in the day, there was a modern list called Soul Sisters where you play, get this, Soul Sisters.
Whoa.
And then you played actual factual a Johnny's Pride Mate.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like one of the
card
best
well,
cards
you
in
had
the
access
deck.
to
Yeah.
4 Soul Sisters. There's the white one and the green color shifted one. If in that, am I thinking of the same deck?
Well, you had
Depends which
8
format.
copies
That's
of
right.
1 mana Soul Wardens in white. You had
Oh,
Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant.
Right.
It was kind of a meme deck because it wasn't that great, but it could just win games because you would get a Johnny's
Like an
Primate
8/8
that's
on
like an
turn
8/8 on
three.
turn 3. Yeah, exactly.
It was great in the first 2 weeks of that standard format after it had been figured out because everyone was like, "What's happening?" Like, they didn't know how to
Yeah.
deal with your deck.
Yeah, and so it's something that I want to mention with this card because this is, well, it's a soul, it's a Johnny's Pride Mate that draws cards and that has evasion. And while there are certainly better 4-drops out there in the world, this is the kind of 4-drop that with in a deck that has every single soul Warden possible, it at least replaces itself. And if it's unchecked, and you're a deck that plays Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes and all these protective cards, it could just take over the game. To be clear, I'm not suggesting this card in something like Ruin Your Evening, where that's more of a grindy kind of control, like a Boa Constrictor style deck that also just doesn't always play all the Soul Wardens. But in a world where they gave us Guide of Souls and Ocelot Pride, and now we have, I think, across Abzan, we have actual factual, like 8 or 9 2-drop Soul Wardens. Like, it is a ridiculous number of them. And again, deck like this just wants redundancy. So, cool top end for a niche deck that is just, it wants more of this, and it's getting, in this set, a bunch of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Ellie.
Let's talk about Generous Pup from Jumpstart. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 Vigilance dog with whenever 1 or more +1 counters are put on Generous Pup, put a +1 counter on each other creature you control. This ability triggers only once each turn. This one may be a little bit easier to figure out than Brigone. Although
Dog typal.
I actually want to say,
Kindred?
call it Dog Kindred. You could put it in your Dog Kindred deck if you have a meme deck that's all dogs. If you're listening, do yourself a favor and look at this card. It's very adorable. But I do want to argue like this card might not be as good in the counters decks as it reads, just because plenty of your draws don't revolve around more than one creature, right? Like the counters deck fundamentally wants to get, an opener with like lands and a creature and a way to like double up counters and a way to move counters onto creatures, right? So there isn't always necessarily like 2 or 3 other creatures around in decks that are playing like, Ozlith and the namesake 1 mana green enchantment. Hardened Scales. It's like opening up with these and also trying to find lands, and like maybe your deck has a Thoughtseize in it or a Path to Exile, right? Like, there's not always room for a ton of other creatures. But that said, like, it's a 2/2 for 2 Vigilance that says whenever that, it doubles the counters, right?
Yeah.
Basically, like, or more than doubles the counters, ideally, if you have 3 creatures. So it's still like pretty great. We're going to try it.
If you're playing a version of a counters deck that has elves, absolutely.
Yeah.
10,000%, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's probably a lock for the green-white only versions. And
Oh,
then,
100%.
And then if you're, Abzan or Naya, like it's on the back on the maybe list. But yeah, adorable dog.
All right, next up, we have the Helpful Hunter. This is a 2-mana 1/1 cat. It's cute as heck. When this creature enters, draw a card. I'm actually more excited about this common than you might think. This actually fills a really interesting spot in a lot of decks where you might not have too many 2-drops. In particular, a lot of the 3-color white initiative decks focus a lot of Blink and a lot of ETB, and they don't actually have a ton that they want to do in those early turns. And this is awesome. This is phenomenal. It goes right there with your Charming Princes and stuff like that. It's a great gap filler. And again, redundancy. Like we just got a card like this in green blue, the frog in Gloomhaven, Pawn Prophet and stuff like that. So the fact that this is just in white right now offers a ton of flexibility in deck building. And I mean, it's another Elvish Mystic. We don't have to talk about it too much, but I love to see it.
Decks rarely want one of these,
Yeah.
and now white has 2 of these.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool.
All right.
Yep.
Wheeler.
Speaking of redundancy, Hinterland Sanctifier, a card made specifically for me. It's a 1-mana 1/2 Rabbit Cleric that says whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. I briefly mentioned that.
Watsy was worried you wouldn't notice it unless they gave you an extra toughness.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't die to Bowmasters.
What?
Okay.
Well,
Hey. Yeah, I like Soul Wardens. There is a bit of a split with the Ruin Your Evening deck where there are some versions that have kind of moved into just being what if I built Orzhov mid-range except didn't play bad cards. And that's a pretty reasonable way of approaching that style of deck. I do think that there is a version that sticks to playing some of the Soul Wardens. That life gain is really good at just stretching out the game and, really kind of locking in that W for you. While also just having some splash damage against like Tendrils of Agony decks and other like aggressive kind of Gruul style decks, mono red, goblins, the kind of deck that actually just has a bit of a better game against the more mid-range builds. Like the mid-range builds can struggle with the like all-in aggressive red-based decks. But the life gain ones with the Soul Wardens,
they have a gas.
Yeah, you just have an easier time of locking people out. So redundancy. I think we're at the point where I'm good now. Like I'm good.
You don't want any more Soul Wardens?
I mean, if they give me like another Guide of Souls, I'll take it. But this is close to where I draw the line because while they are good in multiples, you do hit a point where you're like, damn, these cards suck.
Yeah,
on turn 8 or whatever.
You rip one off the top, turn 14, you're like, ugh.
Well, like, how stoked are you when it's like Caracas, Fetchland, Plains, 4 Soul Wardens? Because if you're trying to play every copy,
honestly,
start to get those.
I am kind of stoked. I'm kind of into that.
You're like,
starting at 24.
I mean, I'm gonna
opponent
if I
can't do
draw
anything.
if I draw a Pride Mate, then I have a 2-mana 8/8 on immediately. But I'll take this one because the second toughness is pretty great.
Well, and it's a bunny.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. They could print one that is exactly this card, not a bunny, and just triggers off of any creature, and I might. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I've done my time in this format. I'm allowed to make some suboptimal decisions.
Like, is this card maybe kicking out? Is Soul's Attendant the one that's like only your creature?
No, Soul's Attendant's everything. It's just May.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a 1-mana 1/1 that's only your creatures? There's one of them, isn't
there?
Like a vanilla
there
one that's...
are.
Yeah.
There's the 1-mana 1/1 that's only your creatures, but also when it dies, it has Disturb or whatever it's called, so you can bring it back
as a flyer or something.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I heard the wah.
Thank you.
But it just kind of made you sound like you were Waluigi. Like you're like wah.
All right. So no one's cleanly getting kicked out by Bunny yet.
No.
Let's talk about Raise the Past. 2 white for a sorcery that says return all creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It feels like this year we talk about, especially at the beginning of the podcast, we talk about this Ruin Your Evening deck a lot. I don't know how many other decks would play this.
Oh, I don't like this in Ruin Your Evening.
You don't like it in Ruin Your Evening?
no.
Okay, all right. Do you have some sort of soldier combo you're pulling off?
No,
with
no,
it?
no, no.
No second
This card-
sunrise
This
either.
card's not on my radar.
No, this is not a Serge card. I'm like, eh.
I assumed that this was here because we want to get back a bunch of Soul Words.
No, I want to get back a bunch of like blood artists and
You
whatever.
think this
I've
is an
sacrificed.
aristocrats
Sure.
card?
I
right?
think this is a Rally
Sure.
the Ancestors style card.
Okay,
You're right,
great.
and that was around Zulaport Cutthroat and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
you just have a bunch of sack outlets, a bunch of cheap creatures. You sack them all, drain them, play it, get them all back.
Do it again.
Rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
You can kind of combo them out for like 13 damage or something like that. if you have,
Yeah,
like, 4 creatures
you
on
draw
the
it
board.
late game against some of the control decks, and if it resolves, you get to bring 3 bodies in play. It's good with the helpful hunter kind of cards.
All right, Nellie's 2025 resolution is to play some aristocrats because it certainly seems like, it's a meme, but it's also true that figuring out which cards can fit into this deck is like a real test of.
I don't
skill
even know if I'd
brewing
play this in
format.
like actual crats proper.
Okay,
like
but
I
say
think you
wanna
would.
jam Rally Ancestors specifically.
Yeah,
that's
and
the-
like a
that's the plan.
combo
Yeah.
kind of version.
Yeah,
Sure,
like
okay.
self mill, fill a whole
We're
bunch of
playing
it, and
Buried
there's-
Alive for
Again-
like 3 mana worth of cards.
Oh yeah. Again,
Larry-
redundancy,
Yeah,
right?
this is
Like-
the 3rd or 4th version of this because
Yeah.
there's the
There's been a
Awaken.
few.
There's the backside of the land in black. There's Rally the
Academ's
Ancestors.
Awakening.
There's the white black X one.
Mortal Servitude.
Yeah, like there's thank you.
Several.
God, what would I do on this podcast without Wheeler, y'all?
There's a couple more if you want.
I mean, I don't doubt it,
All
right?
I'm curious about this.
Yeah,
deck now,
but that
too.
and that's the thing,
Okay.
right? Like you through dredgers, through self mill, it kind of feels like a Angel of Glory's Rise style of
Yeah,
like,
you could even
loot
have it.
style
You
deck,
could have
right?
it be a Hermit Druid deck
Yeah.
if you really want to.
Right.
Like that's kind of hot.
Yeah,
You just have to wait to get one of these sorceries into your hand first, and then your Hermit Druid, I guess, because none of them have flashback or anything, do they?
No, I mean, well, you could have Snapcaster Mage.
Snapcaster Mage and Hermit Druid together at last.
That's kind of hot.
ooh,
There's some old Magic players that are really stoked for this
yeah,
deck.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
2 people have just hello.
Yeah, this one's for the millennials listening to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on to Sky Knight Squire. God, we're either talking about weird like 4 mana dirtles or killer 2 mana drops or something like that. What a weird set review so far. So Sky Knight Requite is a 2 mana 1/1 cat scout for 1 and white. Whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. As long as this creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has flying and is a knight in addition to its other types. So this is, I mean, I actually like this in the +1/+1 deck as well because it grows by itself. It synergizes with cards that do that, and then it doesn't stop growing, and eventually it has flying and kills people. So the nice thing is, if you can put +1/+1 counters on it outside of its first triggered ability, it still counts. It just gets big and it gets it. But you can also just play this in like a go wide white strategy deck because it's going to get out of hand pretty quickly. Similar, I mean, probably the downside to this, I was going to compare it to some of the great humans that grow on synergies. It's a cat scout, so it doesn't fit into those other decks, which I think would make it kind of god tier. But this is a fine above the curve threat that's going to grow, and with a little bit of support is going to be very hard to deal with.
Yeah, it doesn't say non-token in the first sentence, so it's like kind of interesting card, next to a Triplicate Spirits or whatever. And also, it bothers me when I see these abilities and they don't say Alliance or Landfall at the beginning. Does that bother anyone else, like templating issues?
Oh, what is the creature one?
Yeah, it's the same as
Alliance.
Alliance
Yeah.
from New Capenna, but
Oh,
obviously
it's
this
called
isn't
Alliance, eh?
Just called
think so,
Alliance.
yeah.
I thought Alliance specifically though had an additional effect when it was the second time it triggered.
Oh, maybe you're right.
Maybe, I don't know. They're not consistent.
Yeah.
Nice
Okay.
nice cat, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for a cat deck.
Hell yeah.
We don't talk about the cat deck.
All right, Wheeler.
Sunblessed Healer is the next card.
Another 2-drop.
1 and a white for a 3/1 human cleric with kicker for 1 and a white, lifelink, and when this creature enters, if it was kicked, return target non-land permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Just had to say non-land, huh? Couldn't let us get back our
Clearly.
Strip or our Urza Saga?
Come on.
This card has a couple of things going for it that is kind of nice. I'm not wholly convinced on this card being like a slam dunk in something like Ruin Your Evening or the Humans deck, but 3-power lifelink is just so annoying. Like, that's just a very large life swing if it connects with your opponent. If it trades with a creature pretty easily. 1 toughness can be a little bit awkward, but again, the decks that I mentioned are decks that find it pretty easy. They can easily kind of adjust its power and toughness. The second ability, like the kicker ability, is where I'm really interested in this, because being able to just be a 4-mana card, a 4-mana 3/1, bring back another 2-mana card from your graveyard, I'll take it. 2 bodies for the cost of 1. Flexibility on when you cast it. You can fight it off Recruiter the card. It's a human. It's got a lot of good going for it. It's whether or not all that is going to line up and, find a home for it. Just really wish you could return lands.
I mean, yeah, we already have Renegade Rallier, but...
Yeah. Yeah, but, Renegade Rallier unfortunately has another color attached to it. Like... I just want the ability to return either my Thalia or my Spirited Companion or
Urza Saga.
My Urza Saga.
Not a big ass.
Not a big ass. But being able to return like a Skull Clamp or a Shadow Spear that's been blown up is pretty appealing as well.
See, it's like that exploding brain meme. The lower level is dies to Orcish Bowmaster, and the Giga Brain is brings back
my Orcish Bowmaster.
Right?
Yeah. Nice.
All right, I don't know if we have one more white card after this, but take us home, Nelly.
I'll do the next white card, whether it's last or not. It's Erdnan, Dramoka Warrior. 1 and a white for a 1/1 legendary human warrior that, when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Look, it's another 2-drop in white for the counters deck. But actually, it has another ability that says, whenever you attack, not even just with this, target attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains first strike until end of turn. If that creature has 2 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it gains double strike until end of turn instead. So, yeah, like another pretty solid slam dunk for the counters deck. It's a 2-drop. We've talked about why that deck wants 2-drops. It's sort of half immune to Karakas, which I love anytime I see, like, the legendary creatures. I know we always have Karakas in the back of our minds when we're trying to evaluate them, and this one, it's like, yeah, you still get the counter every time you play it.
Good with your Karakas.
Yeah, you might end up setting up your own Karakas just to generate counters in the late game. Also, like, if they want to turn off the trigger, like the second part, they have to Karakas you like at begin combat. So you'll have, your second main phase worth of mana. Like, they can't even kind of get you on end of turn unless they're willing to deal with the first strike / double strike. Yep. Yeah. Solid Dramoka Warrior.
It's a human.
It is also a human.
And a warrior.
We might have a mono white version of this deck pretty soon.
Yeah.
If we don't already. Yeah.
All right. Welcome to blue. Our starting card is the Archmage of Runes. This is a 5-mana 3/6 giant wizard for 3 blue. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. It's so big. This reminds me of the good old days where Blue Moon would play like actual finisher threats,
like Consecrated Sphinx,
like
Frost, or Titan, Inferno Titan.
Well, so not Inferno Titan. I was thinking Consecrated Sphinx and was it
7 mana?
Keranos?
Or no?
Keranos, right?
Yeah,
the 5-mana
Keranos.
indestructible god that would like either draw you a card every turn or lightning bolt something.
Mm-hmm.
And this feels like that's where it wants to go. It discounts your spells, which is huge, but a lot of the issues with the creatures that discount your spells, so Goblin, Electromancer, Brawl, they're tiny. They're just little guys. They don't impact the board that much. I mean, obviously they impact the board a huge amount because of the spell discount. But like, this is going to gum up the board beautifully to give you time to kind of cook with your spells and card advantage.
I definitely went on a roller coaster ride with this card because I put it on here because I'm like, oh my god, I'm excited to play this in Blue Moon and like Scapeshift turns.
Yeah.
And then I was like, it's a 5-drop. I'm not actually playing this.
You're like, it's not a legend and it's a 3/6.
And then I got back and I'm like, actually, who cares?
Nelly's gonna sit at firmly the second stage here, which I think was my first stage when I first read it. And it's like, this is 5 mana, it's a 3/6. It sort of has an ETB, right? Like, it does get value immediately theoretically, but
So go with me on this journey.
If we get to 5 mana, then we can really start ramping. Like,
No. You
Okay.
have 6 mana,
great,
and then you cast this with a mana leak in hand.
great.
Or you just have Force Will or Force Negation.
Yeah.
It survive. My thought for this is
It
that
does a very good job.
Just protect good cards with Force of Will.
yeah, this is a good card.
This is a good card.
Okay.
All right,
So
all right.
my baby deck for the past like 3 months has been Rug Scapeshift Turns that splashes black for Demonic Tutor. Like your point spread is Walk DT Mystical, and it used to be Ren 6, but this dreaded council had to ruin all of our fun.
Bunch of idiots.
And you get to 5 mana a lot very easily, right? You play these
That deck
rampant
does, for
growths.
sure. Yeah. That
Yeah.
deck's on 5 mana before it dies, almost always.
And you want to have like cost reduction because like 5 mana is actually not enough. Because it's not just if you're just casting a temporal manipulation or a time warp or whatever without any board presence, then it is just explore.
It's just rampant growth.
which can actually be enough.
I mean, you're
because,
playing Explorer in the deck off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Or
playing
at least-
Explorer and Growth Spiral and everything.
And the classic turn 2 time walk just to draw a card and play a land, right? Like,
I mean, that's breaking the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Might as well
yeah,
do it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that this card it doesn't get Caracased, it doesn't die to Prismatic Ending or Cut Down or Fury, Magnetic Sinkhole, doesn't die to...
Specifically because it's a 3/6, which would normally be so bad. But
Like, it does get disrupted, but
yeah.
also, I don't know, sometimes, especially with that deck, you just set up turns where this is just going to be the best up the beanstalk you've ever seen.
I was actually thinking of Up the Beanstalk this whole time as well.
Yeah. And like I'm a Hercule hater.
The 3 mana 2/4.
I hate that 3 mana
I
2/4.
thought you were talking about the recall, and I was
No,
like, I'm so
I mean I do
confused.
hate Hercule's
never-
recall.
Have you never drawn 2 cards with it?
I mean I have.
Okay, so I did
but
that.
I've also just played a horn turtle.
Yeah.
And this is a bigger horn turtle that doesn't get Caracased.
That's true. It doesn't get
Yeah.
Caracas. But like the Horn Turtle games, like sometimes are sweet too because the format's very aggro. I'm not sold. I'm curious of your list that jams this. I remember you told me the same thing about the 5-drop from Duskmourn. Is it 5?
The
Mythic?
Overlord?
Yeah, the Overlord.
Yeah, the
So
Overlord was all right.
that one I'm curious to try in that deck too. I haven't played the Rugscape Shift.
I cut the Overlord with
this
the
guy?
intention of playing this guy.
Also,
Alright.
this being a wizard is also additional upside with like Flames of Anwar.
Yeah, that's
Sure,
true.
right.
That does
Sure.
come up
Yeah,
quite
like it's
more often.
actually
Well,
relevant, right?
Also, it doesn't die to Flame of Anor.
Yeah.
That's kind of like 3/6 is such a good body.
Don't get me wrong, Nelly. I am normally not high on cards like this, but this one I think has enough. I don't have to convince you. I just have to defend myself.
No, I'm gonna remain unconvinced until this thing kills me. You can get this effect where you draw a card off an instant sorcery on like a 4 mana 2/2, right? Like there's one of those
Yeah,
from
but that just dies.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm just saying that like if either half is your poison, like and you're
Oh,
looking at this
sure.
card and you're like excited to get your spells reduced, you can do that on a bunch of good cards for only 2 mana. And then if you really just want to draw cards off all your spells, you can also do that from that Magecraft buddy from Strixhaven.
Yeah.
Archmage Emeritus for
Yeah.
1 less mana. I get that it has 6 mana or 6 toughness. And I get that it draws a card off Beanstalk. Like,
All right.
I love that Beans is this card that's like a good card that then like lets everybody like trick themselves and be like, oh yeah, 5 mana, the sweet spot. Thank God this isn't 4 mana.
Force of will.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about this drawing a card off Beans.
All right, let's move on. Wheeler.
Drake Hatcher. 1 in a blue for a 1/3 human wizard with vigilance, prowess, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you put that many incubation counters on it. Remove 3 incubation counters from this creature. Create a 2/2 blue Drake token with flying. I think this card's pretty bad. It's definitely the kind of card that convinces you that it's good, and like can get away with it because it's cheap. Not to tie it back to Archmage of Emeritus or Archmage of Runes or whatever it's called, is that like you look at this card and you're like, oh wow, I mean, I just have to play like 2 spells and I hit them, and then all of a sudden I get to make a Drake, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, like maybe like this card is just, I'm willing to give it fine, but I've gotten got by like Storm Chaser Mage style cards too many times in the sense of like being convinced that it was good. I'm just not impressed by this card. It feels like it doesn't really have a home. It doesn't drive me to want to find it a home or to brew a new home for this card. And like the payoff is reasonable, but also just like I get a 2/2. Like I guess that's kind of all right.
If you're in the position that you just played that Otterball Elite creature, Kitsa,
Yeah.
and you were like, "Dan, if only it weren't for Caracas," then maybe you're in the position of being like, "Sweet, I love this card."
Damn, I wish Kitsa was worse.
They're just better prowess threats, though.
The payoff is definitely worse. I think the Kitsa and this thing are the only 2-mana 1/3 vigilance prowesses.
Yeah.
So like, it's not a very exploit. It is like a brand new kind of like stat line set of French abilities for this year. But I'm with Wheeler. I don't think this card's good.
All right, next up, Nelly.
Hey, let's tell you all about Kaito, Cunning Infiltrator. 1 blue for a legendary Planeswalker Kaito that starts with 3 loyalty and has a triggered ability that says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Kaito. So that's going to give you a loyalty counter for each creature you control that deals combat damage to a player during each combat damage step. +1. Up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, then discard a card. -2. Create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. -9. You get an emblem with whenever a player casts a spell, you create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. Okay, so we're a 3-mana planeswalker that comes down with 3 loyalty. It can gain loyalty if you're winning, right? If you're ahead, it gains loyalty a whole bunch the more you're winning. And then I think the most important ability to focus on at first when you're evaluating it is the +1. Lets you loot even if there's no creatures on the board, and it lets you get a creature in and then possibly just exchange attacking that creature if you have one for another loyalty. So that's going to be like 5 loyalty that you can sort of count on if you manage to play a 1 or 2 drop and then you untapped, you can cast this and your opponent's tapped out, which is a pretty common enough situation on turn 3. Like your opponent probably played a 3-drop as well. And so you could think of it as a 3-mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker that let you loot. It's going to either gain you some life or keep getting to push damage through, or it's going to make some creatures. I keep thinking of Mu Yan Ling, which is a card that like doesn't get played a bunch currently.
R.I.P.
But it did for a little while.
Yeah, but
And I just think of that card as being so much more impactful than this card looks. Like I'm not very excited for this.
my issue with this card is what are you ticking up towards? Like you're getting this loyalty. You like that? You like all the 2/1s?
No, that ultimate wins the game. That's the only good thing about this card.
Yeah,
is that its ultimate actually just wins the game.
Sure, it's just going to poop out 18 of these
Infinite.
2/1s.
Yeah, where the other version of this card, the Dovin from Ravnica Allegiance,
3 mana, and it could like stun a creature. Sort
it
of
makes Thopters. It's +1 ends up so it's like 1 blue and a white planeswalker that has a plus ability that is this passive.
Right.
It's like +1 is until end of turn.
All right.
This
Whenever you
passive.
damage gain
This
loyalty
passive,
to a
yeah.
character.
Its minus makes a Thopter token, and then its alt requires a lot of loyalty. There we go. Dovin Grand Arbiter. Yeah,
right,
3
but then
starting loyalty
you just draw 2
+1.
cards or whatever.
Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you put a loyalty counter on it. -1, you make a flying Thopter token and gain a life. And -7 is you look at the top 10 cards of your library, put 3 of them into your hand, the rest on the bottom. Now that does kind of win you the game, but not if your deck is full of cards like Dovin Grand Arbiter.
Right.
And so, but like getting an emblem, anybody casts a spell, you get a 2/1. Like that does just
it's a
win the
player.
game. Yeah, whenever a player
any
casts.
player casts a spell.
cool.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I looked at this card while you were talking about it, and I just thought like I could just be playing a Johnny Nicottle Pariah.
Yeah.
Like I could just be playing a deck with better cards. Or if I am playing a deck that wants this kind of card, like Flying Men comes to mind, for 3 mana, I better be casting Back to Basics. Or I better be Vendilion Cleaking them or casting my Brazen Borrower or whatever.
I want a minus ability that does something more than just make a 2/1, because it just feels like its impact on the board is so minimal, other than maybe dictating that your opponent's going to start trying to attack Kaito instead of you, so it can't ult. But like, you're playing a 3-mana fog suddenly. I don't know.
The only nod I want to give this card is that there's been a bunch of cards this year, not just in this set, that have been templated like Titans. So there's a bunch of like cards that are like okay or good that say when this attacks, and the +1 works well with those. So if we keep getting more of those kinds of cards, and we start seeing decks that are like leaning into these like Titan style creatures and playing things like Swiftfoot Boots or the Greaves or whatever to try to like maximize your value off, you know, an Omnivorous Flytrap or whatever, like if that ends up being a viable strategy in Canadian Highlander, then maybe we look back at this guy and say, hey.
I mean, it is a 3-mana planeswalker. I did think it's really good with Nadu.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Next up, Kiora, the Rising Tide. This is a 3-mana 3/2 legendary merfolk noble for 2 and a blue. When it enters, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards and threshold. Whenever Kiora attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. I really had a hard time pronouncing a lot of the words.
There were a lot of
there.
letters in that word. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I wrote a note to build a deck with this card.
Does it play Swiftfoot Boots?
No.
Is it a commander deck?
No.
Yeah.
I think this card's fine.
You
Go
don't
ahead,
you don't
Serge.
like this card?
No, I like this card. It's tough because in Merfolk, it doesn't really do the things that I think I'm missing in Merfolk, which is like more lords and a better density of like killer 2-drops.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-mana 3/2. It's going to get stronger from the other things that Merfolk is doing. It's going to offer card selection, which is huge because if you're playing sort of this like tempo-y, if you've played Fish before, if you're playing the Fish strategy, the card selection can be helpful. I don't know how better to describe it than that. If you know the archetype, you know what you're talking about. And it does give you this wonderful eventuality of, hey, I'm going to start making 8/8s and you're going to die. And you're going to get threshold faster than you think if you're playing like cantrips and counterspells and your creatures just dying and fetch lands. So yeah.
Why did you look at this and think Merfolk?
Because it has the word Merfolk on it.
I see.
Would you just play this as a blue mid-range card and just kind of have fun with it?
Well, the places that I've seen this card pop up, it's funny because this card looks terrible. Like,
Really?
I think
don't
it
hate
looks pretty bad.
I spend 3 mana for Faithless Looting all the time.
That's not good.
And you get a
but it's
body
something that
afterwards?
Well,
comes
you
up.
you paid 3 mana for Faithless Looting
Yeah, okay.
because you've already spent 1 mana, or you're like, oh, I just milled a Faithless
So
Looting.
you're thinking like Sultai Recurring Nightmare or something like that.
You got to have delve cards in your deck if you're playing this card.
Where I've seen this card pop up is in Check Pile, the 4-color no white best cards in the format into one deck. Specifically the versions that are all in on like every Goyf and like abhorrent Oculus style cards.
Fan of Power Goyf here.
Yeah, I ran into this. Somebody's playing like a Rug Saga kind of deck. It was like Rug. Think of all the things that you would hate to see in Magic the Gathering, but it filled its deck pretty quickly.
That is odd that this is making it into mid-range piles. Like that's strange to me.
That's what I'm saying is that it looks bad, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like
It
it's like
doesn't
a
look good enough for that. That's why. Yeah.
What if Champion of Wits could get Caracas and also just didn't have that late game like uncounterable 4/4 draw 4 until you have this on the board and you don't have a removal spell for it.
Oh, and you just see
And then
this
it just
8/8
makes an
and you're like,
8/8.
oh,
Yeah. It's the kind of card that when it's on the board, if you don't respect it, it will just make an 8/8. Even if they have 3 cards in their graveyard or whatever, they're about to like go untap, fetch land, surveil land, thought scour, attack, make an 8/8. It's not the best thing in the world, but it has shown up in these decks that have proven to be pretty good and have tournament success and does something that you have to deal with. And yeah, Caracasing it over and over again will kind of stop it. It's 3 mana to replay, but letting that kind of deck just churn through its library is a little tough.
that's so funny. I can picture this getting cut in like 3 months from that deck.
Yeah, maybe.
I think maybe it's got new toy syndrome if it's seen play in mid-range decks. I'll happily eat my words on that one.
I'm going to kill this man with this card.
Oh yeah, I will. I will die
I don't
with it.
even think it looks that bad. Like, sure, it's if you don't get the 8/8, it's worse than Champion of Wits, guess, but actually has more power than Champion Wits off the rip. Like
Yeah.
in the Caracas situation, it's awkward. Yes, you got to dig for 3 mana, but that's not good enough. But in every other situation besides Caracas, it's like I played 3 mana for the back half of a Faithless Looting and I got a 3/2. Like I got to sculpt my hand and I have a roadblock.
I'm not super enthused for that though. In a world where I could be playing Barrowgoyf, like in a world where I mean, I am playing this card with Barrowgoyf.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I mean is that like
you play the Barrowgoyf first, then you play this and attack with the Barrowgoyf.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like, well, you could play this first too. I mean,
sure.
What I'm getting at is that like this is 3 drops are a competitive slot.
Absolutely.
2 toughness is really bad on a 3-drop creature.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And Legendary's bad on a 3-drop creature.
And just like it, you look at this and you think that it has so many strikes against it, but then you play with it and then it's actually kind of threatening.
This card evaluation is cracking me up. All right, let's move on.
Sure.
Mischievous. Wait, yeah,
is it you?
Yeah.
Mischievous Mystic. 1 in a blue for a 2/1 human wizard with flying, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. There was a card printed in Modern Horizons 3 called Emrakul's Messenger that is very similar to this. It was a 2-mana 2/1 fairy Eldrazi rogue that made Scion tokens
1/1
on
Scions.
the 1/1 Scion tokens whenever you draw your second card each turn. These 2 cards are very comparable. The benefits of playing this one is that the Emrakul's Messenger is devoid.
Yeah, can't pitch it. Yeah.
It sounds goofy to say, but like not being able to pitch it to your forces, your subtlety, to your there's some other bad blue pitch cards that this deck is playing. Misdirection, like that kind of thing is a big deal. It being a wizard has some genuine consideration for some of the other cards that you were playing in your deck. And it makes more blue fairies. So while it's not a fairy itself, it can make additional fairies, which, comes into the conversation with like that deck is just dying to play Spellstutter Sprite. And Spellstutter Sprite is getting better as cards are getting cheaper. And so I think you can maybe craft an argument of like, which one do I play between the 2? I had that argument with myself, and then I settled on I'm just playing both.
Just play both.
Yeah, I've just played
Classic.
both. Yeah.
And in which deck? Just Flying Men?
Just Flying Men.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just Flying Men.
I'm into this card in Flying Men.
Yeah.
All right, Nelly.
Let's also talk about Phantasmal Shieldback from the Jumpstart set. 1 blue mana for a 1/3 turtle illusion with when Phantasmal Shieldback becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it, it's an illusion. And when Phantasmal Shieldback dies, draw a card. So this is a 1/3 roadblock that looks absolutely heinous from across the board from a Ragavan. Like, oh, I gotta kill that. So I'm not going to have my spare mana to dash this turn. And I really like it for that reason. And then also, it just sort of like, it feels like maybe a way back into a simpler time when we could play cheap creatures like Wall of Omens that would cycle and allow us to get up to the mana to be able to play like Wrath of Gods and have counter magic up in hard control decks.
Blue's got a Wall of Omens, Nelly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first blue cantripping creature or anything. We mentioned Pawn Prophet earlier this podcast, but this is only 1 mana, and so because it's 1 mana, I think it deserves some consideration. It's really good at drawing the card because if your opponent tries to exile it, it's going to sacrifice itself. So, like, although you have to wait until it dies, you're getting that card eventually, like, unless they fly over.
You know what? Wall of Omens can't attack.
Wall of Omens can't attack. This thing can't wear a sword or anything. But, if you just need to go wide to get the initiative back, this is another Mons Goblin Raiders for the call of that. Not that you're playing those, but, it's got a point of power.
I'm glad you got this card, Nelly. I'm happy for you.
Me too. These 2 don't like this card at all, and that's fine. But blue-white, like, real control is this archetype that kind of has just gotten out-competed mostly in the format. Like, it might have some real stalwarts that are, like, true blue and sticking with it, but if you look at the tournament data, it's like, this deck isn't the deck that it was 5-10 years ago, and, like, that's fine, and, like, I obviously am dating myself with this comparison, this explanation of why I wanted to include this card in the podcast, but I just think that this is kind of, like, it reminds me enough of like what those decks would have been excited about that it's like a little, I don't know, little beacon for people who want to play cheap cantrips.
So I like blue-white, like
Yeah.
as a deck. But one of the strikes against it is that why am I playing just blue-white when I could play blue-white X, right? Throw in that third color. And I found that the color that most best kind of retains that feeling of classic blue-white and the play patterns was green. Like Bant control,
Yeah.
legitimately dope, right? Like
Yeah,
you
no,
get your
actually, I've run
Okos
into
and
that
stuff.
one. Yeah.
But also what green gives you is Icefang Coatl and Wall of Blossoms. Like, and they're totally fine. They're good. Up the Beanstalk. Like
Yeah.
the Bant Beans
Beanstalk,
kind of deck.
sure.
Like
mean,
Beans
like
isn't the
Archmage of
roadblock
Runes?
that this is. No. I don't want this. Serge, I gotta tell you, you haven't been helping me on the Archmage of Runes. Like, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I'm trying to speak to the scape shift, and you're just like,
Sure.
and what if we Wrath of God? So my issue with this card is that, like, yeah, I like the roadblocks. I like a slower game of Magic. I just couldn't think of a place to put it that would be like reasonable. And then the pitch was just like, oh, but I wouldn't play blue-white. I would just play Bant, and then by playing Bant, I get the better versions of these cards. That's my take.
That's a fair argument. I mean, yeah, the reason to play less colors in our format is usually just whether your meta is particularly like moony or whatever, but like the format isn't very much right now. So
I may
that's
be shooting myself in the foot too with the next card, because I'm going to talk about it in positive terms that this card might actually be okay if I'm playing the next card with it.
right.
Yeah, it
Well, why don't you take that
Look,
one and I'll take the
yes,
final one.
okay,
All right,
okay.
let's move on. Now,
We might forget Shield back, but Nelly wanted to say it's one
right.
mana.
Plagon, Lord of the Beach, also from the Jumpstart set. 2 and a blue for a 0/3 legendary creature, Starfish Wizard.
It's the starfish, not the
When
turtle.
Plagon, Lord of the Beach enters, draw a card for each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. And then for a hybrid blue-white, target creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power this turn. So this is a card that looks like crap. But
No, I mean the art is fantastic.
the art's great.
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
fire, man. Yeah.
this
The
card
words, though.
popped up in CDH a bit.
Whoa.
And I was like, that's very weird. And then I read this card again, and for some reason I thought maybe like the abilities were kind of reversed. Like, this is a 3-mana creature that if you have some consideration to play more defensive cards in your deck, it is going to regularly draw 2 or more cards. The floor is that it just draws 1 card. And it can attack for 3, which is not the end of the world. It does cost some mana. It's really good into Caracas. It's
Yeah.
really good with your own Caracas. And then, this isn't probably helping my case, but Riptide Laboratory in this card's kind of awesome.
It's a wizard.
It happens to be a wizard.
I mean, it's probably worth noting because if you just got excited about this card with Caracas, the very next game you play, you're going to cast it, and then your opponent's going to Caracas it when you have
With
no
the
other
trigger
creatures
on
on.
the-
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Trigger on the stack, no other creatures on the board, and you're going to draw 0. But Wheeler's still right. It is good
It
with
uses last known information. And
Oh, I wish. No. People listen to this podcast.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was enough convincing by people that are very good at this game, admittedly in different formats, but we share a lot of DNA with CDH. They like drawing cards and doing brutal things, and like they don't have to worry about Caracas, and we get to play this with Caracas. That feels kind of neat. I just think there's nothing that does this at this mana value, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a 3-mana card that can draw you, like, repeatedly 2 or more cards every time it hits play.
If you play this, draw 3 cards, and then I try to attack into it and can't because it has 3 toughness and Ragavan only has 2 power, like, this thing's going to seem like a house.
Yeah.
And the last card we're going to talk about is the Sphinx of Forgotten Lore. This is a 4-mana 3/3 creature Sphinx for 2 blue. It has flash and flying. And whenever this creature attacks, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So this is a flash, flying, repeatable Snapcaster-ish sort of thing. Obviously, the comparison to Snapcaster falls off immediately in that it has to attack to do it. So you're not going to get the play pattern of being able to set up like a protection spell or a counter spell, which is what a lot of the play pattern with a Snapcaster is. Probably closer to the 1/3 in red.
Dreadhorde Arcanist?
Like a
Dreadhorde
Dreadhorde Arcanist, right? Like if you're playing a lot of cheap like lightning bolts, chain lightnings, or thought seizes, like you wanna reuse those spells over and over. That's a sort of deck you'd want to put it into. But I mean, also it's a flash flying 3/3, which is cool because a lot of flash flyers are like 3/1s or smaller bodies or something like that. And so you can just play it as a flash threat with upside. It's neat. I don't have immediate home for it outside of maybe that Grixis shell or blue-red shell I was talking about.
I'd be more up to bat for this card if Galvanic Discharge didn't get printed. Like, we just have more 1-mana deal 3 instant speed cards. And now I would rather play Kess, Dissident Mage.
Honestly, yeah, 3/4, right?
Yeah. Even though, the Karakas on the Legend or whatever,
Yep.
and that's Grixis, this is blue. This has some game to it,
Yep.
but it feels very, like, 4-drops have to be really good.
That's the thing, right? Like, everything on it is good, but it's just not good enough. Which is a heartbreaking evaluation for Mythic.
Yeah.
I could see games where this takes over.
Of course.
Yeah.
The ceiling on this card is huge.
Yeah.
Like, if, you're going to have games where if you chose to include this in your deck, and then you can even get back like a insert sorcery that costs 2 and does something helpful on the following attack, like, that game might be over. You manage to untap with your 3/3 for 4 and attack with it, and now the world's your oyster, right?
But you also have to build the deck for that to work, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't work in blue-white control.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You're like, if you're just getting a free ponder off of this or something, you're like, that's nice, but it's
Yeah, and none of us can think of a deck where we feel it's definitely correct to include this. Sorry.
all right. So
It's my turn.
well,
It's been whatever. It's Wheeler's turn.
no. It is your We'll
We've
go
had
to you.
3 since I haven't had one. in 3
Let's
if
have
want.
you start, and we'll go back to
normal?
me. Yeah,
Sure.
Nelly, start us off with black.
First black card we're going to talk about is Bloodthirsty Conqueror. It's 3 black for a 5/5 vampire knight with flying and death touch. And whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. Hooray! It's one of those combo enchantments, except it's also a 5/5 flying death touch. Like, looks a butterfly. Is this Baneslayer Angel? I mean, kind of. It is a 5/5 flying lifelink, actually. It doesn't have first strike or protection from dragons, but I don't know. Like, this.
Flying Death Touch. This doesn't have lifelink.
No, it means that if you hit
Yeah.
them for
Oh, I'm
5,
sorry,
if you hit them for 5, you
Yeah.
gain 5 life. So
Yeah.
it doesn't actually have lifelink, but it kind of has lifelink.
Yeah,
You have to connect with your opponent.
with the opponent, not the
yeah,
creature.
it has asterisk lifelink. So I don't know.
Sorry, I wanted to say it before the comment said it.
It's fine. Yeah, it doesn't actually have lifelink. If it blocks, you don't gain life or anything. But yeah, there's another card in this set that this goes like infinite with at common, and there's a bunch of other cards that are popular more in Commander, where you have like a way with several black enchantments or just 2 or whatever that you can combo kill people off of 1 gain or loss of life. And so this being a piece of that combo that's a creature is kind of like, well, maybe that's legit for 2-player. I haven't messed around with it. It's also just a vampire that's like got okay stats. It's a flying vampire.
It's got like big old Baron Senior energy of like, oh, this is what a vampire lord ought to look like.
Yeah, like
But-
Goblins has this situation for quite a while now, but it doesn't come up that often in games, but it's there where they can get a combo together off of like their Boros Reckoner style creature that's a 2-mana 1/1 Mog Maniac, and then like dealing a bunch of damage to that with something, and then they
This is
combo
not
you.
the combo I thought you were going for.
It's fine.
The like Snoop Kiki Jiki line.
No, yeah, there's that too. Or yeah, Snoop Key to turn Snoop into Kiki Jiki.
Snoop.
That's probably the more regular combo.
Yeah.
But they have a couple. Anyway, they've got a few different combos they can
Yeah.
get. So vampires having access to also I have a combo is honestly more exciting because black is the color of tutors. So will we see black-white vampires going for this and like having a combo line available? Angel will let us know.
Next up, from the Jumpstart product, we have Evereth, the Viceroy of Plunder. God, that's so weeby. Sorry, I just like looked at the art and I couldn't read the words anymore.
Yeah.
This is a 3-mana 2/2 legendary vampire soldier with flying. Sacrifice another creature or artifact. Put a +1/+1 counter on Evereth's. Evereth. If the sacrificed permanent was a treasure, gain lifelink until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. Then, when Evereth dies, you may pay 1 and a hybrid black-red. When you do, deal damage equal to its power to each opponent. So we have a free sack outlet, which is always good. However, this free sack outlet is only as a sorcery, which is kind of interesting. And it also has a sort of like fling cost at the end, in that, you know, if it dies, you can pay fling cost to deal power to each opponent. It has a lot of upside. All right, let's talk about the upside about this. This is a vampire. Vampires love stuff like this. It's a free sack outlet, which is always very strong. It has evasion, which is great. It has a lot of words on it, which are all very strong. It's also a 3-mana 2/2 legend, which means dies to everything and it gets bounced by Caracas. So if you are maybe I don't even think you need this as a sack outlet in Aristocrat. So I think if you're looking for maybe a little bit of Aristocrats shenanigans in Vampire, check it out. But I don't know if I'm too stoked on this card.
Let me tell you, if I did update Mardu Aristocrats like literally yesterday. Let me tell you if this ended up making the cut.
I can't imagine it would.
I like that you're pulling your phone out to check, because are you genuinely not sure?
I'm genuinely not sure.
Yeah.
I remember humming and hawing, and then I was like, yeah, this is the right call.
It is a free sacrifice outlet. We've said that like 5 times.
The fact that it's
a big deal.
The fact that it's sorcery only is a mega downside.
That's
mega
true.
downside.
So I did not include this in my list.
All right.
But after not seeing it, I went, oh, that's weird.
Why
so
did
I think
include
you
this?
should be playing this.
Okay.
Do you?
Yeah. I just think like free sack outlet, despite it only being sorcery.
The
speed.
sorcery speed is huge. But anyways, finish your thought. And then
Free sack outlet with a permanent buff on a flyer. And like, yeah, you get Caracas, but also there are certain decks where Caracas is pretty awkward with some of your cards. But like, I don't know, if my opponent's using their resources to Caracas my stuff, like, I'm probably okay with it. I'm just killing them, right? Like, I'm killing them with other stuff. It's not like the Caracas on this just kind of, I mean, it can just ruin your plan in some spots, but like, it's not the same as like, I'm a Gruul deck, I need to kill you before I run out of gas, right? You're a deck where just all your cards suck. And so just like, but you just have this constant stream of them and your opponent is constantly trading down. This does kind of go outside of that rule, but I think you could just catch people with this card, and you like there's enough benefit to high rolling with this card that I think I'm okay playing it. Yeah.
There are a lot of lines like, if you get to untap with this, you know,
Yeah, you win the game.
you would just kill. Yeah, you have another sack outlet, so after combat, you've like hit them for 5 with this thing, and then you hit them for 10 because you get to fling it. So
That's a lot of damage.
that's yeah. If your opponent untaps and you don't have Caracas for their Evereth, like, watch out, you might be dead.
All right, Wheeler.
Hungry Ghoul. 1 and a black for a 2/2 zombie with pay 1 generic, sacrifice another creature, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. I mentioned up at the top of the show that there are 2 typal decks that I have had my eye on for quite some time. Soldiers being one of them, zombies being the other. This card looks like a draft common, and it is, but one of the issues that Zombies has is that it doesn't have a lot of 2-drops. The deck has a lot of 1-drops that are pretty good, has a lot of 3-drops that are pretty incredible, but it lacks 2-drops. And this set gives us 2 of them. This is definitely the worst of the 2, but it provides something the deck already wants, which, you know, a 2-drop with an easy to pay mana cost.
Doesn't have a downside.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like, you can look at this and be like, okay, why are we talking about this? But it's all upside.
It's an upgrade over Walking Dead.
It's just the upside is not as flashy as some of the other typal decks now get, right? But like, yeah, you need to play your Dwynen's Elites and
zombie players look at this and you're like, oh yeah, you have it so bad, right?
It's another sack outlet that provides a permanent buff on curve, and it's easy to cast, and that's good enough for me.
Nelly.
Yep. Zombies rejoice. Yeah, let's talk about Infestation Sage. 1 black mana gets you a 1/1 elf warlock. with when this creature dies, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token with flying. It's Doom Traveler in black, which is already a color that you play in
This
Aristocrat.
is so big for aristocrats.
Yeah, 1 mana, 2 bodies.
Everybody clap.
The backside is flying, just like Doom Traveler. The kindred types, the creature types are like kind of relevant. Not probably doesn't matter in the decks that care about this card the most, but it is an elf and a criminal or whatever. What's
Oh, an outlaw.
It's an outlaw. It's an elf.
All
It's an
right.
elf. It's an outlaw, and then it makes an insect on the back for your
Nope.
I don't know, cards that count insects. Oh wait, Swarm Weaver. We talked
Oh,
about
yeah,
Swarm
Swarm
Weaver.
Weaver.
Hit. Woo! Swarm Weaver hit.
All right. Next up, Vengeful Blood Witch. This is a 2-mana 1/1 vampire warlock for 1 and a black. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It is so huge to get another Blood Artist. This is wild.
Do you want to take a guess as to how many blood
There's-
artists that we have?
There's
now?
got to be 10 now, right? Is there
Well,
2 digits of blood
2?
artists?
Sorry, at 2 mana or in general?
I want to say total.
Let's go.
We play the Bastion of Remembrance, right?
Yeah.
We always play Bastion. of Remembrance.
Let's say 3 or less.
Sure.
At 3 or less, I'm going to say this is number 5, maybe less. No, hold on. Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, Bastion of Remembrance.
There's a black and white one from.
Oh, the zombie one. No.
There's definitely a blood artist that costs the black and a white.
There is, but I'm not counting the zombie one.
Oh, because it's only zombies, right? I'm going to say this is number 5.
What I'm going to. Here's what I'm going to qualify.
Okay.
Get ready, kids. You can count at home.
Yeah.
Blood Artist, Cruel Celebrant,
That's the black white one.
Ellis Ilcor,
Oh yeah, the legendary black and white.
the legendary black-white one.
Yeah.
Judith the Scourge Demon.
Yeah. The
Oh,
Rakdos one.
Judith, of course.
Marionette Apprentice, the Modern Horizons 3 one.
Great.
Okay.
I'm going to give a shout out to Mayhem Devil. It's
Sure,
basically it.
sure.
Card's kind of messed up.
Sure.
The Vengeful Blood Witch. Zulaport Cutthroat. Bastion of Remembrance. The Meat Hook Massacre.
Meat Hook Massacre. Yeah.
And then you could maybe say like Goblin Bombardment.
Sure.
It's kind of there
Sure.
too.
10. 10. You can be picky now.
You're gonna have a blood. You're gonna have
Oh,
a
you
blood
play
artist
well.
when you play.
play them
Yeah.
Like
well.
I'm just saying, like when you play this deck,
Yeah,
10% of your deck now are
Yeah.
blood artists. So you're gonna have a blood artist. Lacking a blood artist wasn't the problem
I-
with why you lost that game.
I love that math, by the way, because this is a conversation. Maybe we could do an entire episode about this, which is let's not talk about blood artists for a second. Let's talk about counterspells.
Sure.
So let's say you are a combo deck or a control deck, and you want to guarantee as much as you can with randomness and magic that you get 1 counterspell. You're like, okay, I want to make sure that in every game I can counter at least 1 thing. What is the density of counterspells that you need to have?
By what turn?
Exactly, right? And stuff like that. But that's the whole point. That's what we talk about when we talk about density. You're not talking about density because you want to make your deck look good on paper or something like that. It's about creating a consistent experience when you play the deck, right? And a counterspell is a great way to look at that. And now with that level of density of blood artists, you can be like, wow, it is reasonable now to assume I will always have 1 and probably 2 blood artists per game. What can I do with that now? How does that change the turn that I kill on? Like sometimes magic is just math, but I love stuff like that.
To make
you know?
to make it very Canadian, it's basically party mix, right? It's like how many pretzels do you want? How many Cheetos do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want more of one thing than another? And Aristocrats is like one of the iconic versions of that kind of conundrum because that's all it wants, right?
Yep.
Is you want things to sack, ways to sack, things that do a thing after you've sacked.
Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
it.
Like,
That's
yeah,
it. And then lands.
A
Yeah.
redundancy
Yeah.
of 3 things, right?
Yeah.
Blood, I almost gave him the finger. Blood artist effects, sack outlets, and creatures that die gracefully.
And of swords to
Yeah,
plowshares.
and then maybe you play Thoughtseize, maybe, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, super stoked to get another blood artist.
Wheeler.
To continue the aristocrat discussion, Wriggling Grub from Jumpstart. 1 and a black for a 1/1 worm. When Wriggling Grub dies, you create 2 1/1 black and green worm
That's
tokens.
so huge.
Yeah, this is 3 bodies on 1 card
That's
at
so
2
big.
mana.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yep.
One thing that may have kind of passed over the mind of a lot of people that don't run into a lot of aristocrats or haven't played it themselves is that this deck does play a lot of bad cards, right? Like Infestation Sage and Wriggling Grub, they're not like Ragavan or Minsc Boo or whatever.
Not White Plume Adventurer.
But there are a lot of incredibly powerful cards that fit into Aristocrats, and not just because you're in those colors, right? Like Orcish Bowmasters makes 2 bodies on 1 card.
Yep.
Ocelot Pride. You are probably gaining a bunch of life, and so you're making tokens, and when you can easily ascend, get the City's Blessing, and then your deck that makes multiple types of tokens, so you will get multiple things off your Ocelot Pride trigger. Flage, a thing that sacrifices itself and is in Mardu, some of the best colors for Aristocrats, that also your garbage. Your graveyard is full of garbage.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, you blocked with your Doom Traveler,
So
and now you can
start
fuel
playing
your
good cards
Flage.
now. Oh my
Play
god.
like a Fable the Mirror Breaker too. Like,
Fable's great.
Yeah.
It makes a token. It
Makes
makes
a bunch
more
of tokens,
tokens.
yeah.
The backside says sacrifice,
Exactly.
right? Like, yeah, Aristocrats is a deck that was kind of a bit of a meme, but has always been pretty good.
Yes.
It's just a little more matchup dependent. Still a bit weak against the Academy decks and whatnot, but I mean, this card is just doing something that we don't have anywhere else.
This is a new card.
This is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Aristocrats got a ton of cards in this past year, and we've seen some of those cards pop up in like Mardu tokens, which has become a real powerhouse of the format.
Yeah.
But Aristocrats is just Mardu tokens, but your curve is lower, which is very and a Johnny Nicottle Pariah.
But also just in black, just in the past 5 cards we talked about, we have a new 2-mana Blood Artist, which is huge. A new free sack outlet, medium, and 2 of the best Blood Artist sack creatures that we've seen printed in recent memory.
Yeah.
Like that's absurd.
Yeah. Cards getting good.
All right, very last card of the day. Nelly, take us home.
It's Zul Ashur Lich Lord. 1 and a black for a 2/2 legendary zombie warlock with ward, pay 2 life, and tap. You may cast target zombie creature card from your graveyard this turn. Okay, this isn't the most flashy and exciting zombie lord. It doesn't pump your other zombies or even really add any abilities to any of your other zombies, unless you count getting to cast them again from the graveyard. But it's a 2-drop.
Yep.
It's a 2/2 for 2, and we talked earlier about how that was one of the main things Hungry Ghoul had going for it. So now you have a 2/2 for 2 that's legendary, but has ward. So if they're trying to bounce it with Caracas, they at least get nugged. And, you know, if you untap with it, you are going to get to recast your zombies. So fits into the curve well if you're just trying to attack. Like, you can just attack with it on turn 3, and so on, or it gives you that late game sustain that the zombie deck is already pretty good at. You know, it's not going to be the only card in your deck that gets creatures back from the graveyard.
Shocked.
I know, right? But that's okay. It has ward 2. It attacks for 2. You only put 2 mana into it. Goes in zombies.
Great.
All right, friends, that is going to do it for part 1 of our set review. Thank you very, very much for watching. A reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you with your support over the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. This is one more very subtle subscription call out on YouTube. Get us to 100K. I'll never mention it again, I promise, but we are so close, and I want to see that play button. Reminder, if there's any cards that we missed that you want to see us talk about, let us know in the description down below. We actually legitimately love reading the comments on our set review.
Thank you.
I do. Not the play review games. I mean, there was no misplays in this that they can talk about. At 4:32.
Oh, there are
no.
misplays they could talk about. They'll find a way.
That's fair. No. It's a joy. I've been Serge. I've been joined by Nelly,
I was here.
a Wheeler.
Stations.
Yes. James is on tech.
Found.
Ooh, let's go. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.